Jin stepped off the transport shuttle and felt his stomach drop, not from the artificial gravity adjustment, but from seeing the massive research station floating in the darkness of space. Through the viewport, the planet Kepler 442b hung like a brown and red marble, waiting to be transformed into humanity's new home. He was only 26 years old, fresh out of the Seoul Institute of Technology, and somehow he had landed the biggest job of his life. This wasn't just any engineering project. This was humanity's first real attempt at terraforming an entire planet. If they succeeded, millions of people would have a new world to call home. If they failed, well, Jin tried not to think about that. Dr. Park met him at the airlock. The older man had kind eyes behind thick glasses, but Jin could see the weight of responsibility in his shoulders. Running a project this big, with this many different species working together, couldn't be easy. "Welcome to Station Aurora," Dr. Park said, shaking Jin's hand firmly. "Ready to change the world, or should I say ready to make a world?" As they walked through the curved corridors, Jin marveled at the technology surrounding him. Holographic displays showed atmospheric readings, soil composition data, and weather patterns from the planet below. Everything hummed with quiet efficiency. This place represented the best of human engineering and determination. "Your timing is perfect," Dr. Park explained, as they passed laboratories filled with scientists from 3 different species. "We just finished the preliminary atmospheric analysis. That's where you'll be working with our Zelathi colleague." Jin had read about the Zelathi in his briefing materials, but seeing one in person was completely different. Nara stood nearly 7 feet tall, her long limbs moving with an elegant grace that made human movement seem clumsy by comparison. Her skin was the color of pale winter sky, and as Jin watched, subtle patterns rippled across her arms like light reflecting off water, but it was her eyes that caught his attention. They were large and silver, holding an intelligence that seemed to see right through him. When Dr. Park introduced them, she bowed slightly in the formal Zelathi greeting. "Engineer Jin," she said, and her voice had a musical quality that made his name sound almost beautiful. "I have studied your academic work on atmospheric processing. Your ideas about carbon sequestration are quite innovative." Jin felt his cheeks warm. Having an alien scientist praise his work felt surreal. "Thank you. I've read your papers on planetary wind patterns. Your mathematical models are incredible." As Nara showed him around their shared laboratory space, Jin found himself genuinely excited. She explained the project with perfect Korean, switching effortlessly between technical terms and simple explanations. Her people had been studying atmospheric science for centuries longer than humans, and her knowledge filled gaps in their terraforming plans that Jin hadn't even realized existed. The work they were doing here mattered. Earth was getting crowded. Resources were running thin, and humanity needed new frontiers. But more than that, this project proved that different species could work together towards something greater than any of them could achieve alone. Humans brought determination and innovation. The Zelathi contributed their scientific expertise. Other species added their own unique strengths. Over the next few days, Jin settled into a routine that felt both exciting and comfortable. He would wake up, grab breakfast from the station's food synthesizers, and spend hours working alongside Nara on atmospheric calculations. They were designing the very air that future colonists would breathe, determining the precise mix of gases that would support both human life and the planet's existing ecosystem. Jin had no idea that he was about to learn something about alien biology that no textbook had ever mentioned. It was a Tuesday morning when Dr. Park appeared at Jin's workstation with an expression that made Jin's coffee suddenly taste bitter. The older man glanced around the laboratory, making sure they were alone, then pulled up a chair close enough that their conversation wouldn't carry. "Jin, we need to talk about something important," Dr. Park said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "It's about Nara." Jin looked across the lab where Nara was running atmospheric simulations, her tall figure bent over a holographic display showing wind patterns across Kepler 442b's southern continent. She seemed completely absorbed in her work, just like always. "Is there a problem with her calculations?" Jin asked, "because her work has been perfect so far." Dr. Park shook his head slowly. "No, Her work is excellent. This is about something else entirely. Something biological. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Jin, how much do you know about Zalathi reproductive cycles? The question caught Jin completely off guard. What? Why would I need to know about that? Because Nara is entering what her people call bonding season. Dr. Park's expression grew more serious. It happens every few years for their species. During this time, their brain chemistry changes dramatically. They become extremely focused on finding and securing a mate. Jin felt uncomfortable discussing this topic, especially about a colleague he respected. Dr. Park, I don't think we should be talking about Nara's personal life like this. This isn't gossip, Jin. This is a safety briefing. Dr. Park leaned closer. When Zalathi enter bonding season, they don't think like they normally do. Their instincts take over. They become incredibly persistent, almost aggressive in pursuing someone they've decided would make a good partner. Across the lab, Nara straightened up from her work and glanced in their direction. Even from a distance, Jin could see something different in her posture, a kind of alertness he hadn't noticed before. When their eyes met, she held his gaze just a moment longer than usual before returning to her calculations. She's been working closely with you for 2 weeks now, Dr. Park continued. You're young, intelligent, and you've shown respect for her culture and abilities. From a Zalathi perspective, those are exactly the qualities they look for in a potential mate. Jin felt his cheeks burning. You're saying that she could... He couldn't finish the sentence. I'm saying that over the next few weeks, Nara is going to start behaving very differently. She might bring you gifts, stay close to you, ask personal questions about your life and family. Her people don't understand human concepts of dating or gradual courtship. When they decide they want someone, they pursue that person with complete dedication. The idea seemed impossible to Jin. Nara had always been so professional, so focused on their scientific work. She treated him as an equal colleague, nothing more. Are you sure about this? She's never shown any sign of personal interest in me. That's because the biological changes are just beginning, Dr. Park explained. But I've worked with Zalathi before on 3 different projects over the past decade. I've seen this happen. The transformation can be quite dramatic. Jin looked back at Nara, trying to see any signs of the changes Dr. Park was describing. She appeared exactly the same as always, tall, graceful, completely absorbed in her scientific work. What am I supposed to do? Jin asked. Be careful. Be respectful, but maintain professional boundaries. And most importantly, Dr. Park's voice became deadly serious. Lock your quarters at night. During bonding season, Zalathi can become very determined about accessing the person they've chosen. They don't always understand human concepts of privacy or personal space. Jin nodded, but privately he thought Dr. Park was being overly cautious. Nara was a scientist, a professional. Surely her intelligence and education would override any biological impulses. Besides, humans dealt with attraction and relationships all the time without losing control of themselves. How different could aliens really be? The changes started so gradually that Jin almost missed them entirely. On Wednesday morning, he noticed that the pale blue patterns on Nara's arms seemed brighter than usual. Instead of the subtle ripples he was used to seeing, her skin displayed deeper blues mixed with streaks of silver that caught the laboratory lights. The atmospheric pressure calculations look good, Nara said, moving her chair closer to Jin's workstation. She leaned over his shoulder to examine the data on his screen, close enough that he could smell something like ocean breeze and starlight. If starlight had a scent, I can handle these numbers, Jin replied, trying to focus on his work despite her proximity. You don't need to check every calculation I make. I know you are capable, Nara said, but she didn't move away. I simply enjoy seeing how your mind approaches problems. Your thought patterns are quite fascinating. That afternoon, during their lunch break in the station's common area, Nara sat across from Jin with her meal tray and asked, How do humans choose their life partners? Jin nearly choked on his synthesized noodles. That's kind of a personal question, isn't it? I apologize if I have overstepped, Nara said quickly. I am simply curious about human social structures. For my research, you understand. Jin relaxed. Slightly. Cross-cultural exchange was normal on mixed-species stations. Well, it varies a lot. Some people meet in school, others through work, some through friends or family. There's usually a period of getting to know each other, dating, spending time together. Nara leaned forward, her silver eyes focused intently on his face. And how long does this dating period typically last? It depends on the people involved. Months, sometimes years. Some humans prefer to take their time, make sure they're compatible before making any serious commitments. Years? Nara seemed genuinely surprised. That seems quite inefficient, Jin laughed. Maybe, but humans like to be sure about these things. Marriage and family are big decisions. As the days passed, these conversations became more frequent and more detailed. Nara asked about human wedding ceremonies, about how couples decided to have children, about family structures and living arrangements. Jin found himself explaining concepts he'd never really thought about before: the difference between dating and engagement, the role of extended family, the way humans balanced individual desires with partnership commitments. What Jin didn't notice was how Nara absorbed every word he spoke. Her pupils would dilate when he talked about emotional connections between humans. Her breathing would slow and deepen when he described physical affection. The patterns on her skin would shift to deeper, more vibrant colors during their conversations about love and commitment. During their evening work sessions, when most of the station's crew had gone to their quarters for the night, Nara would position herself at the workstation directly next to Jin's. She no longer sat across the room at her usual spot. Instead, she found reasons to collaborate on tasks that didn't really require two people. "Your body temperature seems elevated," she observed one night as they worked on atmospheric density calculations. "Are you feeling unwell?" Jin realized he had been sweating slightly. The station's environmental controls were perfectly calibrated, but somehow he felt warm whenever Nara was nearby. "I'm fine, just focused on the work." "Human physiology is quite interesting," Nara continued, her voice carrying those musical undertones that seemed more pronounced lately. "The way your species responds to various stimuli, the changes in heart rate and breathing patterns." Jin glanced at her, wondering how she could possibly know about changes in his heart rate. But Nara was studying her datapad with apparent scientific detachment, and he decided not to ask. By the end of the week, Jin had to admit that something was different about Nara, though he couldn't quite put his finger on what it was. She seemed more vibrant somehow, more present. Her movements had gained a fluid quality that made his eyes follow her around the laboratory. When she spoke, her voice seemed to resonate in ways that made him pay attention even when she was discussing mundane technical details. Still, Jin dismissed Dr. Park's warnings as overcautious. These were just normal variations in alien behavior, nothing more significant than a human colleague being in a good mood or feeling particularly social. He had no idea how wrong he was. The first time Nara brought Jin lunch, he thought it was just a friendly gesture between colleagues. She appeared at his workstation, carrying a tray with perfectly prepared Korean bulgogi and rice. Somehow she had programmed the food synthesizer to create his exact favorite meal from back home on Earth. "I noticed you often skip lunch when you are focused on calculations," Nara said, setting the tray beside his keyboard. "Proper nutrition is essential for optimal brain function." Jin looked up from his atmospheric pressure models, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness. "Thank you, Nara, this is really kind of you." He took a bite and was amazed. It tasted exactly like his grandmother's recipe. "How did you know I liked bulgogi?" "I have been observing your food choices," she replied simply. "Your preferences are quite predictable." The next day she brought him green tea ice cream for dessert. The day after that it was homemade kimchi that somehow the synthesizer had produced perfectly fermented. Each meal was exactly what Jin would have chosen for himself, as if Nara had been studying his tastes with scientific precision. Other changes became harder to ignore. When Nara moved around the laboratory, her steps seemed to flow like water. Every gesture looked deliberate and purposeful, almost like a dancer performing for an audience. Jin found himself watching her work, distracted by the hypnotic quality of her movements. "Jin," she would say, and suddenly she would be standing right beside his chair, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her tall frame. Her shadow would fall across his console screen, forcing him to look up at her face. "The carbon dioxide levels in Sector 7 are fluctuating," she might say, leaning down so that her silver eyes were level with his. "Perhaps we should examine this together." Her voice had developed new qualities that Jin couldn't quite describe. When she spoke, something in his chest would vibrate, as if her words were creating physical sensations inside his body. During their evening work sessions, when the laboratory was quiet and empty, her voice seemed to fill the entire room. "Human. Emotional responses are fascinating," she said one night, standing behind his chair as he worked on atmospheric calculations. "The way your species forms attachments, the loyalty you show to those you care about." Jin could feel her presence like a warm pressure against his back. "Attachment is important for social species," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "It helps us work together, take care of each other." "Yes," Nara said, and he could hear something like satisfaction in her tone. "Taking care of each other. This is a concept I find very appealing." As the days passed, Jin began noticing how other team members reacted when Nara was around. Dr. Kim from the geology department would find excuses to work in different areas when Nara entered a room. The maintenance crew would complete their tasks quickly and leave whenever she appeared. Even Dr. Park seemed uncomfortable, watching their interactions with increasingly worried expressions. "Jin," Dr. Park said during a brief private moment, "how are things going with your research partner?" "Fine," Jin replied automatically. "We're making excellent progress on the atmospheric modeling. Nara's contributions have been invaluable." Dr. Park studied Jin's face carefully. "And personally? How are you finding the working relationship?" Jin paused, trying to put his feelings into words. "She's very dedicated. Sometimes I think she cares more about this project than anyone else on the station. She stays late, brings me food, makes sure I'm taking care of myself. It's actually quite thoughtful." The expression on Dr. Park's face suggested that Jin's answer wasn't reassuring. "Just remember what we discussed about boundaries, Jin. Professional boundaries are important, especially in situations like this." But Jin was too focused on their breakthrough to worry about workplace dynamics. The atmospheric models were finally coming together, showing exactly how they could transform Kepler 442b's hostile environment into something that could support human life. Working with Nara felt like the most important thing he had ever done. He didn't realize that for Nara, working with him had become the most important thing in her entire existence. Jin's eyes burned as he stared at the holographic display showing their final atmospheric calculations. The numbers were perfect, absolutely perfect. After 16 straight hours of non-stop work, he and Nara had cracked the code that would allow them to terraform Kepler 442b in half the time anyone had thought possible. "We did it," he whispered, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. "We actually did it." The breakthrough was revolutionary. Instead of the projected 50-year timeline, their new atmospheric processing method could create a breathable environment in just 25 years. It meant that people currently alive on Earth would see humanity's first terraformed world. Children born today would grow up to walk under alien skies that humans had made livable. Nara stood beside him, her silver eyes reflecting the glow from the data displays. "Your carbon sequestration equations were the key," she said softly. "Without your innovative approach, this would not have been possible." Jin felt a wave of pride and exhaustion wash over him simultaneously. His brain felt like it was full of cotton, and his hands shook slightly from too much caffeine and too little sleep. The laboratory around them was littered with empty food containers, discarded calculation sheets, and the remnants of their marathon work session. "I need to sleep," Jin said, stumbling as he stood up from his chair. "My head is spinning." "You should rest," Nara agreed. "Tomorrow we will present these findings to Dr. Park and the project directors. This will change everything." Jin nodded, barely able to keep his eyes open. He gathered his personal tablet and stumbled toward the laboratory exit, his mind still buzzing with atmospheric ratios and chemical equations. The corridor lights seemed too bright, and his footsteps echoed strangely in the quiet station. As he made his way to his quarters, Jin's thoughts kept returning to their success. This breakthrough would make him famous in the terraforming community. Universities would want to study their methods. Other colonies would use their techniques to transform new worlds. His name would be remembered alongside the great pioneers of space exploration. The excitement of their achievement fought against his bone-deep exhaustion. Part of him wanted to call his parents on Earth and share the news immediately. Another part of him wanted to run back to the laboratory and double-check their calculations one more time, but his body had other ideas. It demanded sleep. Jin reached his quarters and fumbled for his keycard. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing his small but comfortable living space: a bed, a desk, a few personal belongings from Earth, and a small viewport showing the stars outside. It wasn't much, but it was home. He kicked off his shoes and collapsed onto his bed without bothering to change clothes. The mattress felt like the most comfortable thing in the universe after 16 hours of sitting in a laboratory chair. His tablet slipped from his fingers and clattered to the floor, but Jin was too tired to pick it up. As sleep began to claim him, Jin's mind drifted through the events of the day. Nara's brilliant insights, the moment when their calculations finally aligned, the realization that they had achieved something truly extraordinary. Working with her had been the highlight of his career. In his exhausted state, Jin completely forgot about Dr. Park's warnings. He forgot about the electronic lock system on his door. He forgot about bonding season and the changes he had noticed in Nara's behavior over the past weeks. The door to his quarters remained unlocked as Jin fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The soft hum of the station's life support systems provided a gentle background noise, and the stars outside his viewport continued their eternal dance across the darkness of space. Jin slept peacefully, unaware that his oversight would soon change everything. The unlocked door that should have been his protection now stood as an open invitation. In his moment of greatest triumph, he had made the mistake that would define everything that followed. Success had made him careless, and that carelessness was about to have consequences he never could have imagined. Jin's eyes snapped open in the darkness of his quarters. Something had woken him, a sound, a presence, a change in the air itself. For a moment he lay still, his mind foggy with sleep, trying to remember where he was and why his body felt so exhausted. Then he saw her. A figure stood silhouetted in his doorway, and at first Jin thought he must be dreaming. The person... No, he realized it was Nara, seemed to glow with an inner light that he had never seen before. Her pale blue skin pulsed with patterns of deep azure and silver that moved like living lightning across her arms and face. The bioluminescent display was breathtaking and terrifying at the same time. Waves of color rippled from her shoulders down to her fingertips, creating an aurora that painted his entire quarters in shifting blue light. Her tall frame seemed to radiate energy, making the air around her shimmer like heat waves. Jin sat up, slowly, his heart pounding as full wakefulness crashed over him. "Nara," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped into his room with movements that seemed to flow like water. Every step was deliberate and graceful, but there was something predatory about the way she moved, like a large cat approaching its prey. Her breathing was deep and controlled, but Jin could hear the intensity behind it. Her silver eyes, usually so calm and scientific, now held a focus that made his skin prickle with unease. Those eyes were locked on his face, with an unwavering stare that seemed to see right through him. "Jin," she said, and her voice made his entire body vibrate. The sound was unlike anything he had ever heard from her before. Her voice had always been musical, but now it carried harmonics that seemed impossible for any throat to produce. The tones resonated in his chest, in his bones, creating physical sensations that were both fascinating and deeply unsettling. "I see. Have been thinking about our conversation," Nara continued, taking another step closer to his bed. The patterns on her skin pulsed brighter, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "About human bonding rituals, about partnership, about the way your species chooses mates." Jin's mouth went dry. Every warning Dr. Park had given him suddenly rushed back into his consciousness with crystal clarity. The locked door, the bonding season, the changes in her behavior that he had dismissed as harmless cultural differences. "Nara," he said, trying to keep his voice steady, "it's very late. Maybe we should talk about this in the morning in the laboratory." She tilted her head slightly, studying his face with that intense silver gaze. "I have made my decision, Jin. After careful observation and analysis, I have determined that you would be an ideal partner for bonding." The words hit Jin like a physical blow. He scrambled backward on his bed until his back pressed against the wall, his mind racing to process what was happening. This wasn't his colleague anymore. This was something else entirely, something driven by biological forces he didn't understand. "I have chosen you," Nara said, her voice carrying those impossible harmonics that made his bones ache. "You are intelligent, dedicated, and you have shown respect for my culture and abilities. Your genetic profile would complement mine perfectly." She took another step forward, and Jin realized with growing horror that she was now standing directly beside his bed. Her luminescent patterns cast an ethereal glow across his face, and he could feel the heat radiating from her tall frame. "Among my people," Nara continued, "when a choice is made during bonding season, it is considered final. The selected partner becomes the focus of all attention, all care, all devotion." Jin's training in xenobiology had never covered anything like this. He had read about different species mating rituals in academic papers, but experiencing it firsthand was completely different. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This was real, immediate, and happening in his bedroom in the middle of the night. "Nara," he said carefully, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. Humans we don't choose partners this way. We need time, conversation, mutual agreement." Her head tilted further, and for a moment confusion flickered across her luminous features. "But you have been receptive to my attention. You accepted my gifts of food. You engaged in lengthy discussions about human bonding practices. You allowed me to work closely beside you." Jin realized with mounting dread that every friendly interaction, every polite conversation, every moment of professional collaboration had been interpreted through the lens of her alien biology as signs of romantic interest. He was in serious trouble. Jin's mind raced as he tried to remember everything he had learned about cross-species communication during his training. The emergency comm panel was mounted on the wall near his desk, but Nara stood directly between him and that wall. Getting to it would require careful maneuvering. "Nara," he said slowly, keeping his voice as calm and respectful as possible, "I'm honored that you would consider me. Could you help me understand more about Zelathi bonding customs? I want to make sure I fully appreciate what you're offering." Her luminescent patterns shifted to brighter blues, and Jin realized his question had pleased her. "Of course," she said, her voice carrying those strange harmonics that made his chest vibrate. "Knowledge sharing is essential between potential mates." As she began to explain, Jin carefully shifted his position on the bed, angling himself slightly toward the desk. He had to move slowly, naturally, without triggering her predatory instincts. "When a Zelathi enters bonding season," Nara said, "our neural chemistry changes to enhance mate selection capabilities. We become more perceptive, more focused, better able to identify ideal partners. The process cannot be rushed or ignored. It is as fundamental to our biology as breathing." "That's fascinating," Jin replied, genuinely interested despite his fear. "How do you identify these ideal partners?" Nara's silver eyes seemed to glow brighter as she spoke. "Intelligence is the primary factor. A mate must be capable of engaging in complex problem-solving, of contributing meaningfully to scientific advancement. You have demonstrated exceptional cognitive abilities, Jin." She took a step closer, and Jin had to fight every instinct telling him to bolt for the door. "Physical compatibility is also important. Zelathi-human hybrid offspring would possess the best traits of both species, your innovation and determination, combined with our longevity and enhanced cognitive processing." The casual way she discussed their potential children made Jin's stomach clench with anxiety. "Nara," Human bonding involves emotional compatibility too. We need to know each other's personalities, our hopes and dreams, our individual goals. "Have been observing you for weeks," she replied, as if this was perfectly reasonable. "I know that you prefer Korean food, that you work most efficiently in the evening hours, that you care deeply about environmental restoration. I know you make small humming sounds when you concentrate, and that you tap your fingers when you are thinking through complex problems." Jin realized with growing unease that she had been studying him with scientific precision, cataloging his habits and preferences like a researcher documenting a specimen. Every friendly conversation, every shared meal, every moment of collaboration had been data collection. "Among my people," Nara continued, "once a selection is made, the bonding process begins immediately. Delay is considered wasteful and inefficient. We have already established intellectual compatibility through our work together." She moved closer again, and Jin saw his chance. As she spoke, he shifted his weight, as if adjusting his position for comfort, but actually moved several inches closer to the edge of the bed nearest the desk. "The honor of being chosen during bonding season is significant," Nara explained. "It means you have been deemed worthy of producing the next generation, of contributing to the advancement of both our species. Many humans would consider this a tremendous privilege." "I do understand the honor," Jin said carefully, "but human customs require a longer courtship period. We need time to build emotional connections, to make sure our life goals align." Nara's head tilted, and Jin saw confusion flicker across her luminous features. "But we have already established that our goals align. We both wish to transform lifeless worlds into thriving ecosystems. We both value scientific advancement and environmental restoration." Jin inched slightly closer to the desk, keeping his movements subtle and natural. "Those are professional goals, Nara. Humans also have personal dreams, where we want to live, how we want to raise families, what kind of life we want to build together. These details can be determined after bonding," she replied with logical certainty. "The fundamental compatibility has been established. Further delay serves no purpose." Her intelligence remained razor-sharp despite her altered biological state, and Jin realized she was tracking his subtle movements with predatory awareness. When his hand moved slightly toward the desk, her silver eyes followed the motion instantly. "Jin," she said, her voice carrying a note of gentle warning, "I understand that humans sometimes experience fear when faced with significant life changes. This is normal, but resistance to biological imperatives only creates unnecessary suffering." Jin's heart pounded as he realized that his careful diplomacy might not be enough. Nara's logical arguments, combined with her overwhelming biological drive, created a situation where normal negotiation tactics might fail completely. The aftermath of that night changed everything on Station Aurora, but not in the way Jin had expected. Instead of fear and mistrust, what emerged was a deeper understanding between species that would influence how humans and aliens worked together for decades to come. Dr. Park called an emergency meeting 3 days after the incident. The station's conference room was packed with researchers, medical staff, and administrators from multiple species. Jin sat nervously at the table, still processing what had happened and wondering if his career was over before it had really begun. "What we experienced," Dr. Park began, "was not a failure of protocol or judgment. It was a learning opportunity that reveals gaps in our understanding of interspecies biology and psychology." The Zalathi medical specialist, Dr. Keth, had arrived on an emergency transport to help with Nara's recovery. He was older than Nara, with skin patterns that remained steady and calm, clearly not in bonding season. "My people have never before worked so closely with humans during our reproductive cycles," he explained in careful Korean. "We did not anticipate how our biological imperatives might manifest in a mixed-species environment." Jin learned that Nara's condition was more complex than simple attraction. During bonding season, Zalathi brain chemistry changed so dramatically that logical reasoning became secondary to biological drives. What humans might call falling in love was, for her species, more like being temporarily controlled by ancient survival instincts. "She chose you," Dr. Keth continued, "because your collaborative work triggered recognition patterns that her altered brain interpreted as ideal mate selection criteria. Your intelligence, dedication, and respectful treatment of her activated biological responses that she could not consciously control. The most surprising revelation came when Nara herself addressed the group. She had recovered enough to speak, though her skin pattern still showed traces of the bioluminescent intensity from that night. "I remember everything," she said quietly. "I understood that Jin was uncomfortable, that human customs were different from ours, but I could not make myself stop. The biological imperative was stronger than my rational mind." Jin felt a wave of relief hearing her acknowledge this. He had been worried that she might feel he had rejected or insulted her, potentially damaging their professional relationship forever. Dr. Park announced the new protocols that would be implemented across all mixed-species research stations. Teams would receive comprehensive training about biological cycles of all species represented on their crews. Early warning systems would be put in place to identify when team members were entering periods of altered brain chemistry. Most importantly, support systems would be available for anyone dealing with biological imperatives that conflicted with their professional or personal goals. Jin's handling of this situation, Dr. Park continued, will become the standard training model for crisis management. He treated Nara as a colleague struggling with forces beyond her control, not as a threat to be feared or defeated. Jin worked with xenopsychologists for several weeks, not because he was traumatized, but because his experience provided valuable data about human responses to alien biological pressures. The research would help future humans working in similar situations understand their own reactions and maintain professional relationships despite unusual circumstances. The breakthrough that Jin and Nara had achieved in atmospheric modeling wasn't forgotten during the crisis. In fact, their work became even more significant when other research teams realized that mixed-species collaboration could produce innovations that neither humans nor aliens could achieve alone. 2 months later, Jin and Nara were back to working together on the terraforming project. Their relationship had evolved into something deeper than professional collaboration. They had become genuine friends who understood each other's strengths and limitations. Nara's biological cycle had returned to normal, but she remained grateful for Jin's compassionate response during her most vulnerable time. "You could have called for security immediately," she told him one evening as they worked late on atmospheric calculations. "Many humans would have seen me as dangerous, alien, other, but you saw me as a person who needed help." Jin smiled, remembering Dr. Park's early warnings and his own naive dismissal of them. "We're all just trying to figure out how to work together. Humans deal with biology too, maybe not as dramatically as bonding season, but we understand what it's like when emotions and instincts override logic." Their terraforming project succeeded beyond all expectations, transforming Kepler 442b into humanity's first successfully terraformed world. But the real success was proving that different species could work through biological and cultural differences to achieve something greater than any of them could accomplish alone. The protocols developed on Station Aurora became standard throughout human space, helping countless mixed-species teams navigate the complex realities of interspecies cooperation in an expanding galaxy. And options.